Savannah Blake stood in front of her walk-in closet, the silk of her navy gown cascading like water between her fingers. She smoothed the fabric absent-mindedly, her eyes drifting to the full-length mirror. At 32, she was the epitome of grace. Tall, elegant, with dark, intelligent eyes and the kind of smile that put people instantly at ease. On the surface, her life sparkled like the flawless diamonds she wore on her wrist. Gifts from her husband, Nathaniel Carlyle, the tech mogul who'd taken Silicon Valley by storm before turning 40. Nate, as everyone called him, was the definition of success. Brilliant, charismatic, and strikingly handsome with his salt and pepper hair and tailored suits. Their story was one the media adored. Savannah, the top law school graduate with a brilliant courtroom record, had left her promising legal career to support Nate's growing tech empire, Carlyle Dynamics. She'd helped draft contracts, refine policies, and even handled some early legal challenges when he couldn't afford a full legal team. As Nate's company flourished into a billion-dollar entity, so did their lifestyle. Now they split time between a penthouse in Manhattan, a beach estate in Malibu, and a countryside villa in Tuscany. Magazine covers featured them as a dream team, brains and billions, one glossy profile had read. They were frequent guests at high-profile charity galas, rubbing elbows with celebrities and politicians. Savannah had become a fixture of the elite circle, her fashion choices analyzed by blogs, her speeches at women's events quoted with admiration. To the outside world, their life was a polished fairy tale, one success layered upon another. But behind closed doors, something was shifting. Savannah had begun to notice the cracks, thin hairline fractures barely visible unless you knew where to look. Nate's kisses had turned brief and routine. His conversations, once filled with excitement and ideas, had dulled into silence or vague responses. He smiled at her like a stranger now, polite, courteous, but distant. Business trips grew more frequent, and late-night meetings stretched into early mornings. Their shared calendar, once overflowing with joint events, now bore Nate's initials alone. She told herself it was just the pressure of running an empire. But deep down, a quiet, persistent voice whispered otherwise, a warning she wasn't ready to face, not yet. The changes began so subtly that Savannah almost convinced herself she was imagining them. At first, it was the phone. Nate had always been somewhat glued to his devices, but now he never left it unattended. He used to leave it charging on the nightstand or resting beside him at dinner, but lately, it was always in his pocket or face down, locked tight behind passcodes he never used before. She once reached for it to check the time during breakfast, and he'd snatched it up so quickly she dropped her coffee in surprise. "Sorry," he mumbled, not meeting her eyes. "Just work stuff. Confidential." It was a flimsy excuse, one she didn't press, at least not then. Their conversations turned sparse, mechanical. Where there used to be late-night talks about dreams and vacations and company milestones, there was now silence or hollow nods. If she asked how his day went, he'd respond with a clipped, "Fine," before disappearing into his study with a bottle of whiskey. The intimacy they once shared had withered. No more long kisses in the hallway, no spontaneous getaways, no affectionate teasing over breakfast. When she tried to initiate anything romantic, he pulled away, citing exhaustion or stress. Once, she caught him staring blankly at her from across the room like she was a guest overstaying her welcome. The business trips increased, too. One after another. London, Berlin, Dubai. Cities Savannah once traveled to with him, now visited solo. Each time she offered to join, he found a reason for her not to. "It's too short," he'd say. "Just meetings. You'd be bored." Savannah knew Nate. She'd built his contracts, shaped his public image, watched him manipulate boardrooms and media cycles with precision. And now, that very instinct, her gut, was screaming that something was off. She wasn't naive. She'd seen the headlines. She knew how men in power changed when temptation came in glossy packages with long legs and fake laughter. Her suspicions eventually bubbled over one night when she met her best friend, Layla, for drinks at a quiet rooftop bar. Layla had been her college roommate, a fierce, quick-witted woman who had gone on to become a private investigator after a short stint in law enforcement. She saw things most people missed, and didn't mince words. "You don't look happy," Layla said, sipping her Negroni. "What's going on?" Savannah hesitated for a beat before letting it all pour out. The distance, the phone, the lies wrapped as business trips. Layla listened quietly, her expression growing increasingly serious. "I can look into it," she offered finally. "Discreetly. You know I'll keep it off the grid." Savannah paused. The thought of someone confirming her worst fears made her chest tighten, but uncertainty was beginning to crush her. "I need to know," she whispered. "Even if it hurts." Layla nodded slowly. "It might save. But you deserve the truth. No matter how ugly it is." And with that, the investigation began. It took Layla only 4 days to find what Savannah feared, and more than she could ever imagine. When her best friend showed up unannounced at Savannah's home, her face was pale and tight with discomfort. She didn't speak right away. Instead, she handed over a black flash drive and sat beside her on the velvet couch like someone preparing to break devastating news to a grieving widow. Savannah plugged the drive into her laptop with trembling fingers. The folder opened with clinical neatness: time-stamped photos, security camera clips, and screenshots of social media posts. Her heart pounded as the first image loaded, a high-resolution photo of Nate stepping out of a black car in Paris. He wasn't alone. Jasmine Hart. Savannah recognized her instantly. A 25-year-old fashion influencer with millions of followers, known for her provocative style, overly edited photos, and rumors of dating wealthy older men. She'd seen Jasmine's face in ads for perfume and Fashion Week runway shows, but never imagined she'd see it nestled against her husband's shoulder at a candlelit dinner in Montmartre. More photos followed: Nate helping Jasmine into a car, Jasmine kissing his cheek while holding a wine glass, the two of them entering a luxury hotel around midnight. Then came the video, a shaky but clear capture of them on a hotel balcony. Nate was shirtless. Jasmine wore only a silk robe. They laughed. He kissed her. She straddled his lap, arms around his neck like they were the only two people in the world. Savannah's throat closed, her skin buzzing with a strange mix of rage, betrayal, and icy calm. She watched every second, absorbing the brutal truth like a knife she refused to pull out. "I'm so sorry," Layla whispered. Savannah exhaled slowly, blinking away tears that threatened to fall. "But she didn't break. Not yet. Not here." "He said it was a conference," she said quietly, her voice almost numb. "He was speaking on cybersecurity and corporate ethics." Layla scoffed. "Guess Jasmine's his new research project." Savannah didn't answer. Instead, she stood, walked to the sleek black console near the fireplace, and picked up her phone. She dialed a number she hadn't used in years. "David Reed," answered the deep, commanding voice on the other end. "It's Savannah Blake," she said, her voice steady. "I need you. Urgently." There was a pause. "Tell me everything," David said. David Reed was more than a former boss, he was a legal legend. A ruthless strategist known for annihilating corporate giants and scandal-stained executives with surgical precision. Savannah had learned everything from him during her early career. And now, she was calling in the storm. She forwarded the drive's contents, gave him a quick overview, and within hours, a legal plan was in motion. Savannah wasn't going to scream or throw things or cry on marble floors. No, her revenge would be cold, calculated, and public. She would make sure the world knew what kind of man Nate Carlisle truly was. Not through drama, but through courtrooms, frozen assets, and legal domination. She looked at herself in the mirror that evening, dressed in black slacks and a silk blouse, her eyes sharp with purpose. The woman staring back wasn't a wife scorned. She was a strategist ready for war. Let him keep his mistress. She was taking everything else. The chandeliers sparkled above like falling stars, and the hum of laughter and jazz filled the air as guests mingled across the Carlisle estate's expansive ballroom. The annual Hearts for Humanity Charity Gala was the biggest event of the season, hosted by Nate and Savannah for the 4th year in a row. Their estate had been transformed into a palace of gold and crystal, with reporters, CEOs, and celebrities weaving through the crowd. Cameras flashed every few seconds. Everyone was watching. And Savannah knew it. She stepped out of the Blacktown car with deliberate grace, dressed in a floor-length velvet gown the color of night, her neckline sharp, her diamonds sharper. Her hair was swept into a low chignon, and her lips painted blood red. Whispers followed her the moment her heels hit the marble entrance. Stunning. Radiant. Untouchable. Inside, Nate stood near the champagne tower, laughing with a group of investors. And beside him, too close to be casual, was Jasmine Hart. Savannah's eyes zeroed in on her, dressed in a glittering silver gown that barely passed for tasteful. Jasmine placed a hand lightly on Nate's arm, giggling at something he said. When Savannah entered the room, Jasmine's smile faltered just slightly. "Savannah," Nate said as she approached, his expression stiffening. "You look gorgeous." Jasmine turned with mock politeness. "Hi. I'm Jasmine. Just a friend." Savannah cut in, her voice cool and loud enough for those around them to hear. "Yes. That's what he told me, too. Multiple times, in fact. While you were crawling into his hotel room in Paris." A ripple of silence moved through the crowd. Heads turned. Conversations stopped. Nate's face drained of color. "Excuse me," he said, almost choking. Savannah didn't flinch. She pulled a small remote from her clutch. A screen mounted on the ballroom wall flickered to life, at first showing the Carlyle Company logo, then quickly cutting to a series of images. Nate and Jasmine in Paris. Kissing at dinner. Entering a hotel. Nate shirtless on a balcony. Jasmine laughing beside him in a robe. Time stamped. Location marked. The final photo was a receipt, Carlyle Company card, Ritz Paris. Gasps echoed like thunder. Jasmine turned a shade of red that clashed with her dress. "You're insane," she snapped, then stormed out of the ballroom, heels clacking across the marble, photographers racing after her like hounds. Nate was frozen. "Savannah, I can explain." "You always say that," she said, stepping forward. "But you never do. So let me explain something instead." She turned toward the guests, her voice strong and unshaken. "As of tonight, I have filed for divorce. And as of this afternoon, per my legal counsel, I've frozen all business accounts tied to Carlyle Dynamics under our joint marital holdings. I have evidence of financial misconduct, misuse of corporate funds, and marital betrayal. The courts will sort the rest." Cameras captured every word. Reporters were already typing. Nate stared at her like he didn't recognize the woman in front of him, and maybe he didn't. Savannah wasn't the quiet supporter anymore. She wasn't standing behind his empire. She was dismantling it, stone by stone, in front of everyone he wanted to impress. She turned on her heel without waiting for a response and walked away, leaving the echo of her decision, and the ruined man behind her, in the glittering silence. The fallout was instant and merciless. Within hours of the gala disaster, headlines exploded across every major outlet. Millionaire Nate Carlyle caught cheating, wife files lawsuit during charity gala. Paparazzi camped outside the estate gates, drones hovered over the rooftop pool, and Savannah's name dominated trending hashtags. But while Nate was busy dodging cameras and issuing hollow PR statements, Savannah and David Reed were already executing the next phase of her plan. Nate tried to get ahead of the story. He scheduled emergency board meetings, fired off emails to legal advisors, and had his assistant contact top crisis managers. But no amount of spin could undo the damage done in that ballroom. Sponsors of his company's upcoming launch began backing out. Influencers pulled their partnerships. Stocks dipped overnight, and whispers of internal corruption spread like wildfire. What Nate didn't know, at least not yet, was that Savannah had been preparing for weeks. With Layla's help and David's precision, she had gathered a meticulous collection of evidence. Emails, fake invoices, unauthorized transfers, and more. She wasn't just ending her marriage, she was exposing a fraudulent empire built on deception. 2 days after the gala, David Reed walked into the Superior Court of New York and filed an emergency injunction, citing marital betrayal, misuse of marital funds, and attempted concealment of shared assets. In the documents, Savannah accused Nate of siphoning money from Carlyle Dynamics and redirecting it through shell companies to offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, all without her knowledge or legal consent. What made the case explosive was Savannah's access. As the silent legal architect behind many of Nate's contracts and financial frameworks, she had privileged insight and damning proof. One email showed Nate instructing his CFO to create a dummy subsidiary to minimize taxable exposure, a code phrase David easily translated into intentional evasion. Another file showed wire transfer logs routing over $12 million to a holding company with no employees, no website, and a single post office box in Zurich. Nate was blindsided when court marshals arrived at his office to enforce the order. The document was crisp, legal, and ironclad. Over $80 million in assets, real estate, investments, company shares, and liquid cash were frozen pending the outcome of the divorce settlement. His access to key accounts was revoked. He could no longer authorize large withdrawals, transfer property, or liquidate holdings. Even his personal credit cards had limits imposed. When his lawyers protested, Judge Holloway, the no-nonsense, no-favoritism type, responded bluntly, "There is sufficient concern regarding the defendant's intent to move and hide assets. The court will err on the side of caution." By the end of the week, the media had their next headline: Savannah Blake Carlyle files injunction, freezes husband's millions after cheating scandal. News anchors called it a masterclass in legal chess. Social media hailed Savannah as a hero for betrayed women everywhere. Twitter lit up with memes of her face superimposed over queens and judges. The Ice Queen, they called her. Calm, elegant, deadly. Nate, however, was unraveling. His team scrambled to respond, but found themselves boxed in at every turn. Every financial move was being monitored. His CFO was under investigation. Jasmine had vanished from the public eye, issuing a vague apology on Instagram before deactivating her account altogether. In private, Nate raged. He threw a whiskey tumbler at his office wall. "She's destroying me," he hissed at his legal team. "She planned this. She set a trap. And she had." Savannah, meanwhile, remained calm and unreachable. She declined interviews, avoided photographers, and gave no public statements. She let her lawyers and her silence do the talking. While Nate scrambled, she remained still, like the eye of a storm. What he had underestimated wasn't just her intelligence, it was her restraint. While he played with fire, she had built a fireproof case. Now the match had been struck, and she was watching it all burn, from behind reinforced glass. The humiliation hit Nate like a relentless wave, crashing over every corner of his life with no sign of retreat. Investors pulled out first. Within 72 hours of the injunction becoming public, shares in Carlyle Dynamics dipped nearly 15%. Major tech blogs questioned the company's stability, citing reckless personal behavior and moral misconduct bleeding into professional operations. Former partners hesitated to return calls, and journalists who once praised Nate as a visionary now labeled him volatile and self-absorbed. Inside his company, the tension was palpable. His once loyal executive board turned cold, calling emergency meetings without inviting him, questioning his leadership, and in some hushed corners, even discussing the possibility of removing him altogether. No one wanted their name tied to a sinking ship, especially not one captained by a man whose personal scandal had turned into financial chaos. Then came the final blow: Jasmine Hart. She'd gone quiet since the gala, but Nate had expected that. What he didn't expect was the text he received late one night. 3 sentences. "I didn't sign up for this. You're not who I thought you were. Don't contact me again." He called her. No answer. Texted. Blocked. Within days, Jasmine wiped her social media clean of any trace of Nate Carlyle. Her influencer persona shifted quickly. Healing, rebranding, and taking time for self-love became the new theme. But Nate knew the truth. She was gone because the money was gone. Without Savannah's silent control, the accounts Nate used to support Jasmine's lifestyle had dried up. The private jet flights, hotel suites, the gifted designer bags, it all disappeared with the click of a legal freeze. Jasmine had no reason to stick around. Now truly alone, Nate turned bitter. The anger that had simmered behind his charm began to erupt. He called Savannah late one evening, his voice low and venomous. "Is this what you wanted? To ruin me? Because you're doing a hell of a job." Savannah didn't blink. She was standing on the balcony of her guesthouse, her temporary residence since moving out, watching the city lights twinkle like stars at her feet. "I wanted the truth," she replied calmly. "The rest, you did to yourself." "I can still destroy you," Nate growled. "Don't think this ends in your favor. If you settle now, I'll make sure you walk away with dignity. But keep going like this, and I promise, Savannah, I'll burn it all down, even if it burns me too." She laughed quietly, a soft, hollow sound. "You're too late for threats, Nate," she said. "I gave you everything. My trust, my time, my name, my silence. And you gambled it all for a fling with a child in heels." There was silence on the other end. She added, "You don't scare me. Not anymore." Then she ended the call and dropped the phone beside her wine glass, letting the quiet speak for itself. Nate had mistaken her kindness for weakness for too long. Now he was learning what it meant to lose everything, not in a fit of rage, but through a woman's cold, unshakable resolve. Savannah had learned to brace herself for betrayal, but nothing could prepare her for what came next. The deeper David Reed's legal team dug, the more rot they uncovered beneath the polished surface of Nate's empire. One afternoon, as Savannah sifted through stacks of financial documents in her temporary office, she noticed something strange: a set of invoices billed under a boutique marketing firm called Starlight Media. The amounts were staggering, hundreds of thousands of dollars, approved by Nate himself, recurring monthly for nearly a year. Yet she had never heard of the company. Layla, ever the bloodhound, followed the trail. It didn't take her long to uncover the truth. "Starlight Media is Jasmine's shell brand," she explained, laying out evidence with grim precision. "Nate's been funneling money into it, under Carlisle Dynamics' operational budget, claiming it as a third-party PR contract." Savannah's stomach dropped. It wasn't just infidelity. It was embezzlement. Nate hadn't merely cheated in his marriage. He had bled his own company dry to inflate Jasmine's hollow career. Designer photo shoots, celebrity sponsorships, luxury events, it had all been bankrolled by misused corporate funds. But that wasn't the worst of it. Layla handed her a separate folder, this one marked in red. "There's more," she said. "I found documents filed under your name at a registered tax office in Delaware." Savannah's heart pounded as she flipped through the pages. Tax forms, bankruptcy filings, and forged signatures, her signature. Nate had created a fake narrative that Savannah was the sole owner of one of their jointly registered holding companies, then initiated bankruptcy proceedings using forged documents. The goal: to offload debt, protect assets under her name, and walk away clean when everything exploded. He wasn't just reckless. He was criminal. David Reed moved swiftly. That same evening, he filed an official motion requesting a forensic audit of all of Nate's finances: personal, corporate, offshore, and shell entities. Given the growing mountain of evidence, the judge approved the request immediately and appointed a court-monitored forensic accountant to oversee the investigation. When Nate received the notice, he erupted. His legal team tried to protest, arguing that the audit was invasive and unnecessary. But the judge wasn't interested in excuses. "There is compelling evidence of financial misconduct," she said sternly in court. "This is no longer just a divorce case, it borders on criminal liability." Savannah sat quietly beside David, her posture straight, her expression unreadable. But inside, a storm raged. She wasn't just watching her husband's empire collapse, she was realizing the extent of the betrayal. Nate hadn't simply broken their vows. He'd tried to erase her, ruin her credit, and leave her bankrupt while shielding himself. The courtroom whispers grew louder. Investors called for Nate's resignation. Government agencies took interest. The press had a field day. Savannah no longer had to speak to be heard. The truth was unraveling, and with it, every lie Nate had ever told. The courtroom buzzed with tension the moment Savannah stepped inside. Dressed in a slate-gray suit that matched the steel in her eyes, she walked past the reporters, past Nate's legal team, and took her place beside David Reed. She looked calm, poised, radiating the same quiet power she once used in boardrooms when helping Nate build his empire. But today, she was here to dismantle it. Nate sat across from her, noticeably thinner, his once confident demeanor replaced by a hollow-eyed glare. His lawyers whispered furiously, papers rustling as they prepared for a last-ditch defense. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but outside the courtroom, the media had already dubbed it the divorce trial of the decade. Judge Holloway entered promptly, her expression stern and unsympathetic. "Let's begin," she said. David rose first, his presence commanding. For the next 2 hours, he took the court through a detailed narrative, layer by layer, revealing the breadth of Nate's deceit. He displayed financial records, email correspondences, and altered contracts that proved beyond doubt that Nate had funneled company funds into Jasmine's faux brand. He showed the bankruptcy paperwork filed fraudulently in Savannah's name, complete with side-by-side comparisons of her real signature and Nate's forged copies. The courtroom gasped at every turn. Savannah took the stand with quiet dignity. She didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She told the truth. About the sacrifices she made, the trust she gave, and the calculated way Nate betrayed them both. "I believed in him," she said. "Not just as a husband, but as a partner. I helped build his empire, even as I let go of my own dreams. And when he could have respected that, he chose to gamble everything on a lie." When it was Nate's turn, his defense was fragmented at best. His lawyers attempted to discredit Savannah's claims, labeling the affair a regrettable lapse, and the financial discrepancies accounting oversights. But David Reed was merciless. He cross-examined Nate until his answers crumbled under the weight of evidence. By the end, even Nate stopped speaking. He simply sat back, jaw clenched, knowing he had lost. After a brief recess, Judge Holloway returned with the verdict. "In light of the overwhelming evidence," she began, "this court rules in favor of the plaintiff, Savannah Blake Carlyle." The room went silent. "Mrs. Carlyle is hereby awarded full ownership of the marital estate, including all jointly held real estate, personal assets, and investments. Furthermore, the defendant, Nathaniel Carlyle, is ordered to pay $50 million in damages for breach of fiduciary duty, marital fraud, and emotional harm caused by intentional deceit." Savannah didn't flinch. She kept her chin lifted as the judge continued. "Effective immediately, Mr. Carlyle is suspended from participating in the executive board or decision-making authority of Carlyle Dynamics, pending separate investigations. In addition, the court finds sufficient grounds to refer the defendant's case for criminal review, on the basis of asset concealment and fraudulent intent." Nate's mouth opened slightly, as if to object, but no words came out. There was nothing left to say. Savannah stood, thanked the judge, and walked out of the courtroom with her head held high, followed by flashing cameras and a storm of reporters. She had won more than money. She had taken back her power. Months had passed since the courtroom battle, and the name Savannah Blake no longer followed Nate Carlyle's in headlines. It stood on its own. Across magazine covers, podcasts, and legal panels, she had become a symbol of resilience. Not a woman scorned, but a woman reborn. She stood beneath the sign of her newly launched firm, Blake & Justice, its bold silver letters gleaming against black glass. It was more than a business. It was a mission. The firm specialized in high-stakes divorce, financial abuse cases, and women's rights litigation. Clients poured in from across the country, celebrities, executives, even stay-at-home mothers, women who had been silenced, sidelined, or stolen from. Savannah welcomed them all, offering not just legal counsel but a path to power. Every wall of the firm told a story: photos of courtroom victories, framed quotes from her opening statements, and letters from women who said she saved them. But Savannah didn't seek praise. She wanted change. And she was making it happen, one case at a time. She lived now in a sleek coastal villa outside Monterey, where sea winds kissed her skin every morning and silence wasn't heavy anymore, It was peaceful. The house was open and airy, filled with sunlight, books, and fresh flowers. No more whispers in hallways. No more cold beds. Just freedom. She took up gardening. She adopted a rescue dog. She learned to sleep through the night without checking a phone or wondering where someone was. Occasionally, interviewers would bring up Nate, his fall from grace, his quiet resignation from Carlisle dynamics, and the rumors of criminal investigations. But Savannah never answered with bitterness. "I'm not here to destroy a man," she would say gently. "I'm here to remind women they are not powerless. That no matter how much you've given up, it's never too late to reclaim yourself." The message resonated. Her speeches were shared widely. Young law students quoted her. Women in shelters wrote to thank her. Even men reached out. Fathers, brothers, allies, wanting to support the cause. Savannah didn't seek revenge anymore. She had something far more valuable. Her voice. And this time, it was all her own. Nate Carlisle now lived in quiet shadows, stripped of wealth, power, and legacy. His estate had long been sold, his boardroom seat taken by younger, smarter investors who wanted nothing to do with the scandal-ridden founder. He spent his days in a modest apartment, combing through legal notices and unpaid debts, watching the world forget him. The once golden tech titan was now nothing more than a cautionary tale. But Savannah Blake had never shined brighter. The Blake and Justice Winter Gala was a glittering spectacle of elegance and power, held at a rooftop venue overlooking the Pacific. The guest list brimmed with lawmakers, survivors, advocates, and high-profile women who had rewritten their own stories. But all eyes turned when Savannah entered, radiant in a crimson gown that hugged her form like flame on silk. Camera shutters clicked in unison. The Ice Queen, the headlines would call her. Not as a woman cold with vengeance, but one forged in fire, strong enough to rise above it. She moved with confidence through the room, offering kind smiles and heartfelt embraces to clients and colleagues alike. The air around her buzzed with admiration, not just for her victories, but for her grace. And then, near the champagne bar, she caught a glance. A man in a tailored suit, eyes calm and warm, watching her with quiet interest. He didn't rush over. He simply raised his glass, as if to say, "I see you." Savannah returned the smile, subtle, knowing, open. Not a promise. A possibility. She didn't need saving. She didn't need validation. She had reclaimed her life, her name, and her future. And now, if she ever chose to let someone in again, it would be on her terms. Freeze him out. Rise alone. The perfect revenge wasn't destruction. It was becoming untouchable.